This week is the week of the Baals. Week dedicated to Baal in all of his aspects. Now, this video will be shorter than usual, but it will convey a really important message and certain practically applicable information regarding occultism. Now, who is Baal? Well, Baal is ancient god of the antiquity, venerated in the Middle Eastern pantheons under the name of the Baal and the title of Baal. And he is mostly remembered to be the god of the Phoenicians, the civilization in the Middle East. And he is mostly described in the Bible as a chief adversary to biblical divinity. Now, when we talk and speak about Baal, we need to understand that he is not the God who had the opportunity to preserve his own image from the perspective of his followers. It is always written and said by his enemies about him. Regarding the sources we have today. So, all of the sources we have today about him come from the point of view of his enemies. That's the first thing we need to know about Baal. And now we will examine the role of Baal and etymology of the name Baal. So, let's start. When we say word Baal and we read word Baal in the Bible, we get the impression that it is some wild, child-devouring and child-burning demon who wants to seduce the people of Israel and force them to worship him instead of one true God. And it is the way he is mostly described in the Bible. However, archaeology and history present a little bit different picture of this divinity, which is really separate from the image we have from him in the Bible. In the Bible, he is mostly known from the episode featuring the prophet Elijah, who defeats 400 prophets of Baal who are in the text presented as false prophets. And Baal is mostly known as the god who accepts human sacrifice of infants. There is infamous episode in the Bible in which it is said by prophet Elijah or Eliach, when rain isn't falling to Israel because they have drought, Eliach, the prophet of Yahweh, is mocking the followers of Baal, claiming, "Why there is no rain? Where is your God? Did he fall asleep?" And then there is infamous episode of prophets of Baal dancing and not being able to summon the rain, while Elijah is able to summon the rain. And this is the episode we have about the Baal. Everything else is presenting him as a demon. So in the Bible he is either presented as evil or as false. And there is a problem with this narrative. You see, Baal is originally depicted as a storm god who brings rain and fertility to his followers. Now, let me ask you a question. If there are indeed the prophets of Yahweh, and if there are indeed the prophets of Baal, right? If followers of the biblical divinity are so powerful, so much stronger than the followers of Baal, how it is possible that they have such a difficulty rooting out, quote unquote, false cult of the false god? Well, the only logical explanation for this is either religion doesn't exist, it's all made up, so Yahuwah and Baal are made up, they both doesn't exist, or both of them exist and both of them are legitimate. There is no third option. So, through backwards understanding, we can clearly deduce that Baal is actually a really powerful god. Because if he was powerless, there would be no point in denouncing it. Because there is no need to denounce so hard something powerless. Only if he is really powerful being, his enemies would have such a strong urge to defeat him and speak against him and kill his priests and kill his prophets and burn his temples. And I will give you here some of the information about history I know from my personal education, and I will also list certain sources later down the video, but first let's talk about Baal from practical point of view. Who is Baal? What is Baal? What we are summoning when we summon Baal? Well, the Baal is a title, it is not the name. Baal means the Lord. And it is title carried by multiple gods. And unfortunately, we do not have true names of those gods preserved. We have only their titles. But what we know from the occult experience and historical documents is that all of those Baals are part of the same energy current. Or all of those Baals are part of the big energy field, which is similar in nature, which is similar in essence and characteristic. Yet each separate spirit of Baal, each Baal divinity has its own practical applications and ways it can be utilized. Yet all of the Baals can be seen as simultaneously being part of the one bigger field, and they all can be observed as aspects of the one same being, yet at the same time, from the practical point of view, they are separate entities. They are all different rivers coming from the same source. They all have the same water, but the water flows in a different manner. So this is kind of metaphor I'm trying to use to explain to my audience the nature of the differences between Baal divinities. I will for the purpose of this video, discuss only the aspects of Baal and how we can use those aspects in our personal practice. I will discuss the topic of human sacrifice dedicated to Baal for another video, and I will discuss in another video, did it exist historically and is it really a thing or people just made it up? And for now we will simply talk about different aspects of Baal and different forms of his energy. Now, when people usually use the title Baal, they usually refer to aspect of Baal described in the Baal epic and also venerated in Sumeria, which is Baal Adad or Baal Hadad, the Lord of good fortune and the storm god of old Canaanites. Goetic demon Baal is technically a demonized version of Baal Hadad, of this Baal aspect. This aspect of Baal, Baal Hadad, is responsible for wealth, order, war, sexuality, and successful agriculture. And also rulership and kingship and reign. But there are other Baal spirits, aka other aspects of Baal. There is Baal Peor, who is in demonized form, known as Belphegor. This aspect of Baal is known to be transgressive. It is known to open pathways and gateways into the wisdom. It is known to be really sexual, and mysteries of Baal Peor involve tapping into transcendental and forbidden aspects of the self. If you want to remove bad habit, Baal Peor is the best choice out of all of the Baals. He is the most dear to me of all Baals. However, I am commanded by my guides to work with Baal Zebul, who is in his demonized form known as Beelzebul. Now, Baal Zebul is spirit of healing, spirit of prophecy, spirit who can help you to control other evil spirits and good spirits and elementals. He can give you authority in the spirit world. He can provide more insight than any other Baals and majority of other dark entities, as well as elementals. He is really powerful and knowledgeable. Many deem him to be the most powerful of all of the Baals. He seems to be in demonology, and in some sources we have preserved from antiquity, before he was demonized, to be the most exalted of Baals. And there is also one aspect of Baal we will cover in this video, which is Baal Berit, the keeper of oaths. He is also known as Beleth in the Goetia. In his demonized form, he is known to bring good friends, and that's the only thing we know about him. And outside of the translation of his name, we do not have a lot of primary sources on Baal Berit. There is one last form of Baal which I want to introduce you to in this video. And that form of Baal is Baal Hamon. Now, Baal Hamon is pretty attested in other historical sources outside of the Bible, but he is completely absent from the Bible. So you have Baal Peor from the Bible, Baal Hadad from the Bible, Baal Berit from the Bible. You have also Baal Zebul from the Bible, but you do not have Baal Hamon. And Baal Hamon is heavily attested in antiquity, but he is attested as the chief god of Carthage, the city destroyed by Romans in a Second Punic War, and it was the city from which the legendary Carthaginian general Hannibal Barca was from. There is no a lot of information about Baal Hamon, but from my personal experience, which is the only source we can take, Baal Hamon is the spirit of Baal who is the darkest and the most Saturnian, and the most transgressive, from the societal point of view. Now we will discuss also how to work with Baal. So, together in this video, the prayer to Baal Zebul will be published as a meditation. And I will kind of motivate you to use the published prayer as a sample for prayers. But I will give you a magical chant to work with any Baal spirit from those mentioned. And the chant is Shah Baal Elim. And then you add the name of the Baal you want to work with. So let's say I want to work with Baal Hadad. So I will say Shah Baal Elim Baal Hadad. If I want to work with Baal Hamon, I would say Shah Baal Elim Baal Hamon. If I would want to work with Baal Berit, I will say Shah Baal Elim Baal Berit, etc. So you have the magical chant, you have short description of each of them. And now I will talk about Baal Hamon a bit, and then we will talk about relationship between Baal and Asherah, who is in her demonized form known as Ashtaroth. So Baal Hamon is heavily attested as being venerated, but the only thing we know about his cult is the fact that he was equated with Kronos and Zeus in antiquity by the Greeks, and that's the only thing we know. There is no information about his cult nor about his worship. So about Baal Hamon, unfortunately, we have to rely on personal gnosis of different sorcerers, and that seems to be pretty unreliable because personal gnosis is a tricky thing to unveil and tricky thing to untangle. So My experience with Baal Hamon is that it was a really dark divinity connected to fertility. And he is kind of mix between Moloch and Baal, in essence. He is a mix between Moloch and Baal Hadad. And he seems to be a really powerful entity. Now, my personal opinion and experience is that all of the Baals are equal in power. And my personal opinion is also that Belial is a part of the Baal metagod. So, Belial, Baal Hadad, Baal Hamon, Baal Berit, Baal Zebul, they are all part of the same collective field. They are all part of the same energy current and they work closely with each other. But for practical purposes, I think that seeing them as separate beings is beneficial for the magician. However, what is same and what is separate in this type of spiritual relationship is something we will never understand. But now, let's discuss a part of this video which is a relationship between Baal and Asherah. So, technically speaking, according to the majority of the sources we have, Asherah or Ashtaroth is not the wife of Baal. Asherah is the wife of El. And by the way, if you don't know, El is one of the titles and epithets for biblical divinity, because originally biblical divinity was part of the Canaanite pantheon, according to archaeological record, which is up to date. And that's the thing which I will discuss later on, but originally Asherah was married to the biblical god. And Asherah was the consort of Baal only in places where Baal was chief god. In most instances, the consort of Baal wasn't Asherah. The consort of Baal was Anat, his mythological sister, who helped him to be resurrected and also helped him to defeat Mot, the god of drought. So the consort of Baal, in most places and cases, was Anat and not Asherah. Asherah was consort of Baal only in places where the Baal was the chief god. And Asherah was usually married to the aspect of Baal who was the chief Baal in that region. In most instances, the Baal Hadad, which is the aspect of Baal as the thunder god and the war god, was the chief god of the region. In some other regions, as for example Ekron, the Baal Zebul was the chief god of the region. But in most instances, when people refer to Baal, they refer to Baal Hadad. So if you want to work with Baal as the chief of your pantheon, then pairing him with Anat is not the best thing. Instead, the best option is to power him with Asherah. But if you want to work with him in a more historical setting, Anat would be the way to go. And by the way, Carthaginian Tanit or Tanat is simply variation of the name of Anat. So Tanit and Anat are the same. So, technically speaking, we need to understand one thing about Baal before we start working with him. She is really quick to manifest results, but she is also really intense force, and one should be careful before conjuring any of the Baals. If you want astral senses developed, the gift of prophecy, healing, and insight, Baal Zebul is the right for you. If you want wealth, power, good fortune, order, and warrior spirit, as well as success in agriculture, Baal Hadad is best for you. If you want transgressive wisdom, sexual alchemy, opening of the gateways, and destruction of bad habits, Baal Peor is the right for you. If you want good friends, good oaths, good relationships, good social circle, and the secret of the covenant, Baal Berit is the right for you. If you want some type of a mystery which nobody knows anything about, which is completely unknown yet related to the Baal, Baal Hamon is the right for you. Now, for the purpose of this video, for the end, we will talk about the difference between Asherah and Anat and how to call Asherah. So, the difference between them is that Asherah is the more motherly form, while Anat is the more warlike form. And the magical chant for calling Asherah is Ha Asherah, Ha Elim. So that's the end of this video. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Peace out.